So this video is specifically on how does phonetics relate to the fields of user assistance and translation in general. I'm not going to make a distinction at this point here today on the difference between phonetics and phonology or phonemics. I don't want to go in that depth because I don't think it's really necessary. This is an overview. This gives some practical aspects. Let's just consider that phonetics and phonology are the same thing, okay? And that will be fine here. So some of the topics that you could work on in using phonetics, if you're in a user assistance or tech doc or role or a video content creator, or even a translator, some of the things that you could work on are, let's take speech-to-speech translation. I want to take a wide range, and I'll kind of fine-tune this down to other specific roles and specific types of areas and tasks. In speech-to-speech translation today, okay, now maybe not in the future, we'll be able to do this better. We go speech-to-speech, but we can't do that. Today, what we need to do in the past 30 years is taking speech, we take a speech and we convert that to text, the spelling system of that language, whatever it may be. Let's take it English, it could be French, it could be German, it could be other language where you've got a speech-to-text system. You do speech-to-text, that creates a written code. Then you can transfer in a text-to-text translation system, whatever it may be. And then I'm not going to give the different types, okay? I'm just going to make this simple. And then you take the text on the other language, the target language, that's a source language, goes to the target language. Then you're going to take a text-to-speech and have it go out to speech to produce the sounds in that target language, okay? And then go back the other way. Okay, so that's when you have speech-to-speech translation. And you can see this happening in Skype Translator. You can have this in Microsoft Translator. Well, Skype doesn't exist anymore, but Microsoft Translator, Google Translate. If you're taking your app, that's what it's doing today, okay? That's kind of the process it's doing. So if you get two phones, you're doing this and you're trying to communicate with two different phones, each direction. That's basically what you're doing, okay? To understand that. So speech-to-speech is an overall one, right? Now, let's go down and zoom in on that and saying, well, how do we do this as a UA or user assistance or a content creator or video content creator or a translator or an interpreter, whatever? How can you be involved in this? Or a computational linguist, how can you be involved in this? So in text-to-speech, well, let's go speech-to-text and start that direction. So speech-to-text, what it's doing is, like I said, it's analyzing the sounds and converting it to text. Now, what's happened behind the scenes is they've made a conversion, the actual phonetic sounds to a text. Now, that's easy to do when you've got a language because we've already got a written orthography, written spelling system. So we get it to map, okay, to that. And, but the thing in phonetics is that you can go, these sounds, I can actually write phonetic symbols for any of those sounds as a phonetician. So it's possible to do that. But so what you're going to have is you're going to have some sounds that don't have meaning, right? They don't have meaning. They're like when you have when you're doing them, you have a video happening, and it's going along, and it's converting speech to text in some app, right? Some video platform like Google Translate or on YouTube, right? It's converting, and it's going to have these sounds that don't know what to do with it, right? Because it doesn't know how to convert it down to the text. So that's when someone will in their caps will say music, right? Or applause, or something, right? Or some background car in the background. They're gonna put that in there because it doesn't know how to convert it to the language because those sounds don't exist in the language. Okay, so that's where phonetics and phonology comes in. But I want to get into the details. Just doesn't know. So the speech system doesn't know what that sounds are. So what happens is, let's take now an example of sounds that don't have, or the text or the pronunciation does not really correspond to anything that language speech text system for that specific language knows. That usually happens in corporate vocabulary, technical vocabulary, marketing specific vocabulary, any corporate, or let's call it institution specific vocabulary. This causes problems for anything that going down to a speech to text system because it doesn't know that. It's good for generic stuff, really general stuff, but it doesn't know how to convert this. So we get this happens a lot in acronyms. It happens with dates, because you're going to say, like, people have started moving right from this is 2004, right? Or we say 2022. Well, now we say 2022, right? Which one do we use? That's important. And this can mix up like release numbers in software. Is it a 2022 or is it 2022, right? These, how to pronounce this, and dates and all this. So these are examples of where you have to train the system to understand which it needs to choose. It's a preference. Other types of things, a lot of acronyms, spelled out acronyms, and pronounced acronyms, right? So you've got pronounceable acronyms and non-pronounceable acronyms, and this happens all the time. So an example of a non-pronounceable acronym is USA, because you're actually saying USA. The company I work for is called SAP. We don't say SAP, right? We say SAP. So those are non-pronounceable acronyms, but there are other acronyms that you can pronounce. Things of, I worked on a project, it was called Diplomat, DIPLOMAT. We actually did it on purpose. You can pronounce it, Diplomat, right? But it had deploying, and then I had a name, this acronym, right? So in the sense, you have to tell the system, do we pronounce out this acronym, or we just spell it out separately, separate letters? These are examples of how phonetics and in working with a speech-to-text app, how you're gonna actually configure that system behind the scenes to be able to create the text that you want it to have produced, right? So I'll give you some examples. I created a dictionary for the speech-to-text system at the company I work for. We have a video platform internally called SAP Media Share. You can do this with Google Translate or even Microsoft Teams or whatever you want, or Zoom. I created a customized dictionary to be able to recognize all this corporate vocabulary specific to the company I work for, all these product names, all these project names, all these acquisition names that it doesn't know how to pronounce it because they're branding, right? It's all this branding. And what we did, I built in the system, and we used it to tweak, to configure those specific sounds that are being heard into it needs to come out in this spoken way, especially for acronyms or two words that are some of the acquisition names, or a field glass, one word, business objects, one word. A lot of these, or Sybase doesn't know what it is. So these are examples of words that the system doesn't know how to do because it's usually they're separate, right? But here I had to configure them so that they come out as the brand name of the acquisition, right? So these are kind of examples of how you can use linguistics in phonetics to be able to get it down to come to text. And that's one way of doing that. Sometimes you need to, it's how you want to come out in a written format from the sound, right? Now let's go the opposite direction. Text to speech. This is where phonetics comes in even more, because this is where you can actually impact it in easier systems for translation or computational linguistics, because the speech to text it's been built that way. The software, the computational linguists and all that, and the software developers, they made the system recognize the sounds. Now, if you go the opposite direction, text to speech, it's a little more, you have a little more play you can with it. So you can take a script, right? You want to go text to speech. Now, the problem is you take in e-learnings and you put the text in, and again, you have this corporate or institutional vocabulary. It's not going to know how to pronounce some of these things because they're kind of specific. So what I worked on, and again, my example was, I created a style guide so that we could rewrite the script slightly with all this corporate vocabulary, institutional vocabulary, so that these aren't meant to be spoken out by a human being, right? Someone reading it, the text, and knowing how to do it, knows this vocabulary, like examples, or the acronyms. Someone that knows the company and or the institution will know how to pronounce them, right? But the system doesn't know how to do it. So you have to rewrite them slightly at certain times, like release numbers, dates, acronyms, all these things. And what I did is I told people in the style guide to rewrite it just as if you listen to a great example is a website, right? The URL. You get a little web link, right? And people in the past, what we did when they're on the TV or listen to the radio, they'll spell it out, right? http://www.// okay? Well, an underscore, right? And space. What I did what I did in the style goes, tell people you have to write out just like that. Write it out that way. Actually spell out the words dot slash slash, right? And and write that out in that specific way, just as if it's on the television. And that's how you can get a text-speech system to actually recognize that specific web link or anything, right? And so you are treating the content that's going text to speech. You're getting to writing the script so it can be spoken by a computer, not by a human being, right? So that's an example of what you can do in user assistance or translation to make it work. That's monolingual. Now you can go to multilingual and all that. You're happening there. Another area that you can work on very practically are an area that uses this a lot are video captions or video subtitles. I'm not going to separate, but it's doing the same thing. So how much you've got within that caption or subtitle in a speech to text, what are the things you're going to be using in that? And you're going to be dealing with a lot of, again, these are specific examples, concrete examples of how you use text as speech to text, right? E-learning, I said that's where you're doing you're going out and making e-learning. There's a lot of avatars. You get a lot of products out there that have talking head avatars. They're using the text to speech. And you've got the phonetics is going to be having to allow you to tweak some of that. Now, sometimes you're going to be, some of these speech systems or these text to speech systems do allow you to use a diction. They call it a diction feature or something. They'll let you actually rewrite it in a certain way within that, maybe using some phonetic alphabet or a different way of writing in the language, so the sound comes out as you want to in the spoken version, right, from the avatar. So those are a few examples of how you as you can do it as a non-expert in phonetics. Those of us that do work in phonetics, we are able to write these in International Phonetic Alphabet or some other type of alphabet. It's called AMPA, SAMPA. Those are for speech systems, but they're based on a different kind of way of how you attribute the letters and the sounds. And then, of course, you have to deal with pictographic languages and all that. So I'll get that in another video. But those are examples how you're going to do that with the tone, with the intonation, with the pitch, with all these different aspects of phonetics that come into play when you're working with a language. So these are a few areas that you can in user systems and translation participate in projects. And this happens a lot in terminology, corporate vocabulary. That's where this comes into play quite a bit. And then we can imagine everything Gen AI, right? Generative AI, LLMs, all this stuff. It's just you're collecting data, right? And spelling, you got to deal with like misspelled forms, right? There's just as much junk out there when you're scraping the web or whatever. You get a lot of spelled form or the missing accent marks, right? This causes problems. So you have to find ways to be able to either compensate for it or to clean it up. And that's where phonetics comes into play in a general way. And there'll be other areas, I can mention this in other videos on the other topics, but under fields of linguistics where this is kind of useful. But that's how you can understand how phonetics is, an overview of how this relates to these couple roles. And come to me if you have any more questions, and I can answer them. And I'll point you to some publications of where those are. I've got quite a few publications, and I've usually referenced a lot of those other people that have been working on it too. And there's plenty on that. So reach out to me if you have any more questions. Thanks so much.